Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Jeremy. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm the Jer in Wellness with Jer. Thanks for checking out my channel. Um, Today, we're going to talk about who should go to therapy and how therapists aren't videographers. Need a better setup. Who should go to therapy? I get asked this question a lot. Never in therapy, right? Those people are already scheduled to see me. But I think in my personal life, I get asked a lot. People find out I'm a therapist, and they usually want to offer some sort of commentary on that. It's a unique job. You don't run into therapists in the wild too often, I guess. It's one of those things. Who should go to therapy? Who could benefit from therapy? I'm biased because I'm a therapist, but I think everybody should go to therapy. I think everybody's going to have stuff going on in their life that would be appropriate to talk about in therapy, and that they could benefit from having a professional kind of in their corner working with them on how that could go better. So I do couples therapy. That's my bread and butter. My expertise is in marriage and family therapy. Couples research shows that couples go to therapy on average 6 years too late. Too late in quotes. You have to go back to the study for context on that. But it's one of those things that's really interesting in the sense of when couples first start experiencing problems, people aren't talking about going to therapy right away. It's one of those things that they're going to work through it, or they're going to learn, they're going to grow. So that average is taking new couples who go to therapy into account. That average is taking couples who've been married for 15 years and are going to therapy now that their kids are moving out, or that their kids are in high school, or they're done with school, or whatever. Like some life transition has come up where they're like, we should go to therapy. So that statistic is a little skewed based on how averages work. But it's also one of those things that kind of highlights that people don't typically go to therapy as often or as early as they could get potential benefit from it. So I think working against that stigma around mental health, around therapy is a good thing. Like having a professional work with you on what's not going well in your life seems like an obvious win to me. Obviously, there are risks associated with therapy, right? Like things could get better before they get worse. Depending on what you're coming into work on, things could get worse in general. That's unlikely to happen. But if you're working on something that is outside of your therapist's scope of practice, or you just are unlucky and get a therapist who's not very good, then they could do some damage. But more likely than not, it's that issue of things might get worse before they get better. And that has to do with the way our brains are set up. Our brains prefer stability. Our brains like knowing what's going on. They like knowing what's going to happen and why it's going to happen. It's not why research has shown we like music, because we know what to expect. So we listen to the same songs over and over again because that makes our brains happy. So even if we're in an unhealthy situation, we know what to expect with that situation. So that is why there's that tendency to stay in relationships that are unhealthy or not seek out help even when the problems are pretty prevalent, because our brain, even if it's uncomfortable or unhappy about something, it is knowing that what's going to happen makes your brain happy. So therapy upsets that, right? Therapy is about change. Therapy is about having things go differently in our lives. So even if we're making positive change in and of itself is still scary. So I think things could get better before they get worse. That's pretty common with therapy. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it happens all the time. I would just say that's one of the more common side effects. If people have side effects at all. Lots of people go to therapy, and it's great and wonderful if they have a therapist who's a good fit for them. So this is a little bit of a separate topic, but I think goes along with, like, should you go to therapy or not? Would you benefit from going to therapy? Absolutely, if you have a good therapist. And a good therapist is a relative thing. Like, you're a unique individual. Every person is unique in their own way. People in mass, a large group of people, follow very set patterns. And so that's how a therapist can operate and connect with you quickly, because people's brains work similarly, but people themselves are very different. So I talk about this somewhat often with my clients, especially my clients who've done a lot of work before they come to therapy. So they've read the books, they've gotten self-help books, they know who John Gottman is because they read at least one of his books. And it didn't help them a ton. And so self-help books are written for general population. They're written for a broad audience. You need to write a book for a broad audience or it won't sell. So the advice that's in there and the self-help tips and those things are usually good information, not always. I'm looking at my bookshelf right now. I only have 4 or 5 different self-help books. I have maybe like 15 psychology books, but only a couple of them are self-help books because I think most of them aren't particularly helpful. Some of them are like bad. But even the ones that are only partially helpful, if there are so many caveats that I have to give before recommending a book, then I'm not going to recommend it. So the books that kind of pass my quality standards are on my shelf, but they're limited, and even those ones that I really like have caveats that I give them. I name dropped John Gottman earlier. Like, I talk about Gottman's writing style. It's very dry. Not everybody likes it. It's not particularly exciting to read, but it is really good information. It's as like watered down as he could make his research, or as palatable as he could make his research without just writing a research paper, which he probably wanted to do because he likes numbers a lot. So it's one of those things where, like, right, that's a pretty quick, easy caveat. I can say, like, skip chapter 1. It's going to freak you out. It's written just to sell his book. You know, those are quick, easy caveats. It doesn't take away from the source material, where a lot of other popular self-help books have so many caveats that I'm going to say. So the self-help books might contain good information, but that information, even if it's good, asterisk, not all of it is, but even if it is good, it's written for such a wide audience that it's not going to relate to everybody on a personal level. It's not going to relate to probably anybody on a personal level. So the people who are getting a lot from self-help books are relating to enough where it's helpful for them, but the people who are reading those self-help books are kind of in that area where it's maybe useful information, but it's not specific enough to their life, so they're having problems either implementing it or understanding it in a way that's useful for them. And that's where therapy is really different than like a self-help book. A therapist has the psychology background like a lot of authors of self-help books have, but a therapist is going to meet with you on an individual level, or on a couple or family level. They're going to meet with you personally and tailor fit what they're working on for you personally. And that's really the big difference, is like having a wealth of information and a lot of knowledge is great. That's in books, that's in self-help podcasts, it's in YouTube videos, whatever. But having somebody who's going to apply it to you specifically in your specific situation is what makes therapy unique. It's having a trained professional work specifically for you on a case-by-case basis that makes it really work well. But finding a therapist who's a good fit, research shows that the number one predictor for what makes therapy work isn't a particular therapeutic approach. It's not something specific about a client type or a therapist type. It's really about how well a client fits with their therapist, how able they are to make a deep connection quickly. So that's why there's so many different styles of therapy, because there's so many different styles of people. Different people who do therapy well have a style that fits for them as a therapist, and that fits very well for a certain subsection of clients, people who are seeking therapy. So there's a little bit of shopping that can happen, and I think that's a good process. I think that's healthy. Finding the therapist who you vibe really well with matters. Research suggests that's the number one indicator of having a good fit. So I personally have gone to therapists. I've had 2 different therapists who've been good in different ways, who have had taken different approaches. Finding somebody who's a good fit, like, I, as a therapist, know what I'm looking for ahead of time, so didn't have to do a ton of shopping. But even with that, like, there were things about both my therapists that didn't fit particularly well. There were parts of it that I was kind of managing or dealing with, or taking, like, what my therapist was doing with a grain of salt. Now, therapists themselves make terrible clients, right? Like, it's the magic behind it all. So when my therapist is doing things for me, I'm thinking like, oh, I wouldn't do that intervention, or like, I wouldn't use that technique, or I would have asked a different question. So using myself as a bad example here, but trying to destigmatize mental health. Your therapist goes to therapy too. Everybody needs help, and it's great to get help. But no, finding somebody who's a good fit is really important, and I think it's key in having a good experience with therapy. I work with a lot of people who have been in therapy before and didn't have a good experience, and what that typically looks like is either it was like really bad, very apparently up front, 2 or 3 sessions in, and they weren't getting what they want out of it, and they stopped going to therapy, or people who have been in therapy for a long time and haven't gotten a ton out of it. And that's always a huge red flag for me, is if people have been in therapy for a long time. There are a couple of things, mostly having to do with trauma, that require long-term therapy. But otherwise, for most issues, therapy is going to be like something that should help relatively quickly. Maybe not fixing everything, but there should be benefit relatively quickly. Your return on investment should be high. Because it's having a professional working with you in a hands-on way. So that should produce some quick results. I usually tell people, like, within a couple sessions, I expect some things to be better. Not everything. I don't even expect anything in and of itself to be completely fixed. That's not the point of therapy. But do I expect to see progress in an area or a couple of areas in quick succession? Yeah. And usually what that looks like is progress gets made, and then we kind of can tackle the actual issues. So we work with kind of the noise and the fluff up front. Every couple comes in to talk about communication, but no couple comes in just to deal with communication. There's always other stuff. So, and I'm using absolutes, and I don't like to use absolutes. There are exceptions, I suppose. But even in that process, it's kind of filtering through what's working in your life, what's not working in your life, and coming up with a plan to make the things that aren't working well work better. And so that, in theory, can produce pretty quick results, and can produce pretty big results quickly, although that's not a guarantee, because, again, it's about that fit you have with your therapist. How able are you to work with that person quickly and effectively? And some people, it just takes a while. Some therapists, it takes a couple sessions to get into the meat of the issue. Some people aren't comfortable just like bearing their souls or airing their dirty laundry when they first meet someone. So having somebody who's a good fit, who like you feel comfortable with up front, and maybe you don't feel comfortable sharing everything, but you feel pretty comfortable pretty quickly, is a good indicator. And then is something happening? So lots of therapists are great listeners. Lots of human beings are great listeners. We're wired for social interaction. Lots of people are good at that up front and are going to make you feel seen and heard, and that's going to be enough to produce some benefit. But as therapy continues, is there continued benefit? If you're having a good experience with therapy, there should be continued benefit. That doesn't mean every session feels good or everything is great all of a sudden in your life, but it means there's progress, and a trend of progress, not just like, I went to therapy this week and this session wasn't great, so I'm going to stop going to therapy, but like, on the whole, these past couple of weeks have felt better because of X, Y, and Z. And then the exception to that is, obviously things get a little bit better and then you hit on that real issue. So maybe it's a self-esteem issue. Maybe it's you have ADHD, or you have anxiety or depression. So you've kind of worked through the fluff, the life circumstances, whatever that's going on. And I don't mean to say that life circumstances are fluff. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they're the core issue. But whatever it is, we've kind of filtered some extraneous issues, made some progress on them, and now we're dealing with the core issues. And there's no time frame for that. Couples therapists, marriage therapists that I know have kind of joked over time, and I've seen this pattern play out for sure, that like usually by that 6th or 7th session, you're getting to like the real issue for couples therapy. But I've had couples who in 6 or 7 sessions are making great progress and we're pretty much done. I've had couples who take longer than that 6th or 7th session to get into the meat of the issue. So there's no like hard or fast rules. People follow general trends, sure, but like there are always exceptions. And those general trends, we talk about human beings in mass, a large group of people follow similar patterns about 70% of the time. So like just statistically speaking, things are going to follow a normal bell curve. That's going to cover our kind of 70% of the time. Is that normal bell curve is going to be the middle of the curve. So not to like super nerd out on statistics. So yeah, feel free to shop around. If you're not having a good experience with a therapist, talk to them about it. If you're not having a good experience with a therapist, try a different therapist. Like there's no right or wrong or rhyme or reason to it. Like it's a thing where you're consuming a product, you should be getting something out of it. And not every therapist wants to work with you. you special darling little snowflake. Some people work really well with depression. Some people don't. Some people like working. I know, obviously, a lot of other marriage therapists who love working with couples, but I know plenty of therapists who don't do couples work. They don't like the experience of having more than one person in a room, or it's too stressful, or it's too much going on at once. So finding a therapist who's a good fit is not only they're a good fit for your personality and your issues, your presenting problems, but also that they are a good fit for what you're coming in with, like that they can work with it, that they can be helpful with it. So there's a lot that goes into finding that good fit. That's why I think it's so important. I don't think it's like a needle in a haystack. I think there's multiple therapists who will be a good fit for you if you're in a metropolis area. But I'm in the Midwest, a second tier city, not like a huge metropolis, not millions and millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people. But yeah, there's a lot of people I can work with in the course of my career at this point. As of 2022, 14 years doing therapy, there have only been a handful of clients who I think have been truly a bad fit for me. That I've been aware of, but there might have been clients who have stopped coming to therapy or dropped out, and we didn't terminate, we didn't break up, we didn't have that feedback where I was aware that I was a bad fit for them. So I can think of only less than 5 people who I have felt as a therapist were a bad fit, but I'm sure that number is higher. So again, these are not like impossible odds. It's not a huge task to find a therapist who's a good fit, but there is some work, and I don't think that's necessarily a realistic expectation to think you're going to find a good fit with the first therapist you try. But knowing what you're looking for, knowing what we want to get out of therapy, and then doing some searching online between therapist websites, directories that are online, that kind of stuff. I'm wary of therapists on social media. I'm doing it because I'm a small business owner, not to do therapy. But it's one of those things with I get a little more wary with like Instagram and TikTok type influencers, even if they're putting out good information, versus their professional website. So when I picked out therapists, I used the directories to find some people, and then I searched for them and went to their website and read their blog posts and saw what else they were doing to get a better feel of it. Part of the reason I'm doing this YouTube channel is because I think people can see me, they can see how much I talk with my hands, what I look like, how I kind of talk, and see if that's a good fit. Like some of this is marketing for sure on my end. To be totally transparent. So some of it is like putting myself out there because I think there'll be people who want someone who seems chill, who's wearing a paisley shirt, has a big beard, has long hair. Like that's going to be appealing to some stuff, and some people it's going to be a big turnoff right away. And so I think all that information is helpful. If your therapist has a website where they have a blog or they have an Instagram account, like taking that information in and using all that to decide if you think it'll be a good fit or not. And then, when you talk to them on the phone for a consultation, or when you schedule with them and you have that initial session, kind of like having that real-time experience is going to be what ultimately helps you decide whether it's a good fit or not. And then that over a long term. So they might present as a good listener and you might think it's a good fit. And then, 4 or 5 sessions in, you might be like, nah, I'm going to go somewhere else or try something else. But also the therapists who might fit well for you might change over the course of life too. So different therapists are going to maybe appeal to you at different stages of your life, or just because you had a bad experience doing family therapy when you were a teenager doesn't mean that you'll have a bad experience doing family therapy as an adult. So I experienced that a lot. People who have had bad experiences early on in life or much earlier in their life then come to therapy and they're in a position to like fit better with me or to fit better with therapy in general. So I definitely think that we all have stuff going on in our life. There's enough stuff that comes up in everybody's life that could potentially benefit from coming to therapy or going to therapy. But there's effort and work that goes into getting a good experience out of therapy, both from your therapist and from you as kind of the consumer or the client for that. So do the work, don't just take whoever's in network, even if you're using insurance and you're going to go through whoever's in network, have a vetting process. Look at people who are in your area who are taking new clients who maybe aren't in network. I don't take insurance because I think insurance gets in the way of doing good therapy. And so as a marriage therapist, I constantly bumped into, we would have limitations on how many sessions we would have that's covered by insurance, or I would have to use certain diagnoses, otherwise insurance wouldn't reimburse. So there's just a lot of clunkiness. And I think Not taking insurance makes me a better provider. Do I understand that creates some financial strain for some of my clients? Sure, but the people who are like confident that I'm a good fit also know that their return on investment is high enough that it's worthwhile. And I very much believe that. That's why I run my practice the way that I do. So it's one of those things with like, yeah, don't just go off of like whoever's down the road or whoever's in network. Like, take some time to really research who's available, who might be a good fit for your particular set of issues, your particular personality. Do that work, and I think you're going to have a good experience with therapy. I think everybody can benefit from therapy, regardless of whether your goldfish died and you're having a hard time with it, or you're going through a divorce, or it doesn't really matter the severity of it. People come to therapy for little issues. People come to therapy to clean something up or to prevent something. I do a lot of couples work with couples who are getting married, kind of premarital work, and like just trying to make sure they're not gonna have issues or prevent any issues from becoming big. So you don't need to be like in crisis. Obviously, I think people who are in crisis would benefit tremendously from having a therapist, but also you don't need to wait for it to get to that point. There's no like threshold you need to cross to think that therapy will be beneficial. Both times I've gone to therapy, I've to the outward world been pretty high functioning. I've gone to therapy for a specific thing that I wanted some time and space to work on with somebody one-on-one, not because like things weren't working in my life. And that's good. That's been really helpful. That's provided me time and space to clean those things up so that they don't become bigger problems. So I think everybody can benefit from therapy. I think people experience enough stressful stuff over the course of a lifetime where absolutely having a professional work with you will be a helpful thing. So go to therapy.